Good morning, all my favorite people. Welcome back to Harvest Moon Farm. My name is Mickey, and today we are going to be making several different recipes for sourdough cinnamon rolls to kind of see what our favorite is. If we have time today, we're also going to do a cherry sweet roll, and that's just because it sounds good, and so I'm going to make it, and we'll see how that goes as well. Hopefully we have time to do everything. So I have been building up my sourdough starter this week, so I hopefully should have plenty for everything that we're doing. So I am going to get an apron on, get some supplies, and we'll get started. For this first recipe, we are going to mix 1 cup of active sourdough starter. Oh, this smells so good. Woo-hoo. To our starter, we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of whole milk, but we want this to be lukewarm. 2 large eggs. Half a cup of softened butter, and 1/4 cup of either sugar or maple syrup. I'm just going to use sugar. And we're just going to mix that up. So to this, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt and 4 to 4.5 cups of flour. And we want to add this gradually. So I'm going to put the first cup in. And then I'm going to start mixing. And then we'll go ahead and add our flour gradually while this mixes. Okay, so now that this has started forming a ball, we're going to let this go for about 8 to 10 minutes until it forms a nice cohesive ball that's not sticky. Alright, so we wanted a ball of dough that's tacky but not sticky, and so that's where we are. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And we're going to mix up our filling. So we need 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and then if you like, you can add 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom or cloves. I'm going to add cloves because I like them. If you do not want to add either one of those other things, you certainly can leave them out. I'm just going to break up our brown sugar and just mix all this together. And then we'll just set that to the side. We want to just lightly flour our surface. And we're going to roll our dough out into a rectangle. We want our dough to be about a 12 by 18 rectangle. I am struggling with this piece right here, so we'll let it be the inside. Now we're going to spread about a 1/4 cup of softened butter over the surface of our rolled out dough. And we're just going to take our cinnamon and brown sugar and spices and sprinkle these over our dough. So you just want to try and get these as even as possible. And then we're going to roll these from the shorter side, which my dough's kind of shrunk, and that's what happens. We're going to roll these up as tight as we can. Like that. And then we can cut these into either 9 or 12 rolls, whatever we want. Let's see. I think I'm going to make mine 9 so that they'll be nice and fat. So what I'm going to do is just lightly mark with my knife, and then I've got a piece of thread that I'm going to use to cut these. So before I cut, I'm going to go ahead and get my pan ready. So I'm just going to use a 9x12 pan. I'm just going to spray it, and then I'm going to use my string, my thread, to cut my dough. So I'm just going to put it under, line it up with that mark that I did with my knife, and we're just going to pull it across and squeeze, and there we have our roll. We're just going to put those in our pan. You can use thread for this, you can use dental floss. Anything that's pretty thin is going to give you a nice clean cut without squashing your dough. If you've ever tried to cut rolls like this with a knife, you know you end up with kind of a squashed, kind of squashes the dough a little bit. So we'll just keep cutting our rolls, put them in our pan, and then we're going to let them rise. So now I'm just going to set these to the side, and we're going to let these rise for 2 or 3 hours until they're nice and puffed up, and then they'll be ready to bake. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start on our cinnamon roll number 2. And for this, we want to start with 1/3 cup of active starter. To this, we're going to add 3/4 cup of warm milk, and we want to make sure that it's not too warm. It needs to be less than 120 degrees because we don't want to kill our starter. And ours is about 93, so we are good. So we'll add this, and then 2 tablespoons of dark brown sugar. I only have light brown, which the author says you can use as a substitute for the dark if that's what you've got. And then we're going to use our paddle attachment, and we're going to mix this until everything is mixed thoroughly. We're going to add 4 tablespoons of butter that we've melted, and 1 large egg. This also calls for a 3/4 teaspoon of salt. I am not going to add the salt since my butter is salted and the recipe calls for unsalted. So we'll just leave that out. Now we're going to switch out our attachments. We're going to remove the paddle, and we're going to add our dough hook. Now for this recipe, it calls for bread flour, not all purpose, so that's what I've got here. And we want 2½ cups of flour. We're gonna add that gradually, about 1/2 cup at a time. Again, we want our dough to be tacky but not sticky. So let's go ahead and remove our dough hook, if I can get it out. And we're going to take our dough and we're going to just put it in this bowl, and we're going to cover it up with a tea towel, and we're going to let it do its first rise. Now that is going to take several hours. Now my kitchen is pretty warm. I have my air off and it is gonna be fairly warm today, so that hopefully won't take too awful long. So we will set that to the side and come back to it when it's time to do the next step. So while those other two are rising, we're gonna go ahead and start on our third recipe. And this one we're gonna go ahead and use our food scale to measure everything out. So we're going to zero it out between each addition and then add our ingredients. So we want to start with 150 grams of active starter. Now if you don't have a food scale, that is approximately 2/3 of a cup. So then I'm going to zero that out, and then we're going to add 325 grams of warm water, which is about 1 1/3 cups. I'm going to check the temperature, make sure that it's not too warm. I'm going to add 300, and I'm going to let that cool just a hair. Actually, I'll just add a little bit of cool water to it. All right, 325 grams, which is about 1 1/3 cups. We're going to zero this out again, and we want to add about 25 grams of honey, which is 1 1/2 tablespoons. Whoops, got a little heavy-handed with the honey. Clear it out again, and we want to add 20 grams of avocado oil or any other flavorless oil. 1 tablespoon, 20 grams is about 1 tablespoon. So we're going to do 20 grams. And then I'm going to set this to the side for a minute, and we're going to mix this with our dough whisk. So we're going to zero it out again, and then we're going to add 500 grams of bread flour. 500 grams is about 4 cups. So I'm just going to scoop it out with that, but we're going to measure to 500 grams. Go. Now we're going to use our dough hook to work this in. We're going to end up with a shaggy dough. You may have to use your hands. Sometimes I do when I'm mixing my sourdough like this. I just want to make sure that we get all of that flour mixed in. So you're going to end up with a shaggy ball of dough like this. All right, now we're going to cover this bowl with a tea towel. We're going to let it sit for an hour, and then we're going to add salt. All right, this recipe uses yeast, and so in addition to your sourdough starter. So we want to make sure that we've got our milk warmed up to the right temperature. It needs to be about 110. So we're going to pour 1/4 cup of our milk into a bowl. To our milk, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of just plain white sugar and 1 teaspoon of our active dry yeast. We're going to stir this together and then set it to the side to let our yeast activate. The other half cup of milk, a 1/4 cup plus 1 teaspoon of sugar. We're going to add a 1/2 cup of our sourdough starter. Now this recipe, because it uses yeast, you can actually use your discard if you have a bunch of discard that you need to use up. I'm going to add that to our bowl. 1 large egg. Alright, and then we're also going to add in our activated yeast mixture. The milk, the sugar, the yeast. We're going to mix that all together. Alright, so we're going to add now our flour. And let me see if this one was supposed to be bread flour. I don't remember. Nope, this one uses all-purpose flour. So we're going to add 3 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. We're also going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Then we're going to mix that up just until it's a shaggy looking dough. Okay, so now we're going to add in 8 tablespoons of butter, which is 1 stick. I have to tell you, when I first read these instructions without my glasses, I thought it said 8 pounds of butter, and I thought, my goodness, that cannot be right. It wasn't. It was 8 tablespoons, so that probably makes way more sense. Okay, so we're going to take our dough now. So we let all of our butter incorporate, and then we let it knead about 5 minutes. I greased my bowl. And now I'm going to get a tea towel and cover this as well. Alright, this one needs to be covered with a damp towel, so I've just wet my tea towel, and we're going to set this to the side, and we are going to let it rise until it has doubled in size, about 2 hours. Alright, so we are going to have time to do our cherry rolls. This is not a sourdough recipe. And as much as I really wanted to use some of the cherries that I had in my freezer, I've got a can of cherry pie filling that I bought at the store that needs to be used. So we're going to use that today. But this will let us know what these rolls are like, and then if I want to make them again, I can use some of our cherries that we picked. We want a cup of milk, and we want it to be 110 degrees. So that it will activate our yeast. All right, this should have done it. Let's give it a check and see. Yep. All right. To our milk, we're going to add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. Whoop. And 2 1/4 teaspoons of our active dry yeast, which that would be equal to 1 of the packets that you can buy. We're going to give this a stir and let it start frothing up. So while that's doing its thing, we're going to go ahead and do the next step, which is a 1/4 cup All right, so the instructions and the ingredients don't match. So the instructions say a 1/4 cup of softened butter. The instructions say melted butter. I'm just going to use my softened butter. All right, so here's our milk and sugar, oops, and yeast. Go ahead and get everything out of our measuring cup here. So I'm going to go ahead and soften this a little bit more, but not melt it. So that was a 1/2 stick of butter. We're going to add 1 large egg and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Go ahead and just blend this all up. To this, we're going to add 3 1/4 cups of flour. We're going to mix that all up. All right, so there's our cherry dough. All right, so I'm going to work this into a ball, and I'm going to put it in a greased container, cover it with a towel, and we'll set it to the side to let it rise till it's doubled, which will be in this temperature, as warm as it is in my house today, maybe like an hour or a little more. Alrighty, so this one has been through its autolyze phase for about an hour, and we are going to add 10 grams of salt, wet our hands, and we're going to start working this in. Wetting your hands when you need to so that it doesn't stick. All right, now we're going to cover this back up. We're going to let it rest for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to start our first round of stretch and folds. We want 4 rounds for this dough. So I'm going to set it over here with the towel over it. All right, so it has been 30 minutes, so we're going to start our first round of stretch and fold. So I wet my fingers, and I'm just going to pull the dough up, fold it over, 1/4 turn, pull the dough up, fold it over, and you're just going to go all the way around the dough, repeating this process. All right, then I'm going to put the towel back over it, let it sit for another 30 minutes, and we'll do the second round. So we're going to do 4 rounds of this total. Our cherry dough has doubled. We're going to flour our surface, and we're going to roll our dough out into a rectangle. And then I've got a 21-ounce can here of my cherry pie filling. And we're just going to pour it onto our dough and spread it out. Whoa! So we want to spread this all around our dough. Leaving a little bit of an edge here so that we don't smash our cherries out when we roll this up. I have this turned the wrong way, so we are going to roll it from the long side. And we're going to do our best to keep our cherries inside the dough. Just not being very cooperative here. I'm going to go ahead and spray my pan. And because this is so sloppy, I am going to go ahead and just do my best to cut it with a knife. Let's see. And then also I will do my best to scoop all this cherry up into the dough as I put it into the pan. So this dough is, these rolls are probably not going to be the prettiest since the dough is fighting me, but they're going to taste good. So we're going to end up with a dozen of these rolls. And you can see that using a knife flattens these rolls out, which is part of what's causing me the trouble. But also because they're so sloppy, I think it would be too difficult to try to use a piece of thread. Alright, I'm going to clean up some of this cherry that I slopped everywhere. Whoops. Alright. So here they all are, and we are going to let these rise for a second time for about 30 minutes until they've puffed up, and then we'll go ahead and bake them. Put that cherry in there. And then we'll go ahead and do our second stretch and fold for this dough. I'm so anxious to try all of these. I mean, I'm going to have a million cinnamon rolls, but that's okay. The people at work have been really enjoying the stuff that I've been bringing in. So, all right, we'll set that to the side for another half hour until it is ready. Okay, we're back for our round 3 of our stretch and fold. And you'll notice as you continue these stretch and folds that your dough changes texture quite a bit. In this case we had oil and other things in it, but if you're doing just a regular sourdough, it'll change from shaggy, really rough dough to a nice smooth ball. All right, that was number 3. We're going to go ahead and put it back over here for another 30 minutes. We've got 1 round left. And our cherry rolls are ready to go into the oven. So We're going to bake those at 350 for about 25 minutes. Recipe number 4, which did include yeast, is doubled and ready to go. First thing we're going to do is mix up the cinnamon for our filling. So we're going to use a 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar and 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. I'm just going to mix this with a spoon so I can kind of break up that the brown sugar. And so it's going to be really dark. It looks like mostly cinnamon, but it's not. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and flour our surface lightly. And we're going to start by kind of patting this out into a rectangle, and then we're going to finish rolling it out. And we want this in about a 13 by 18 rectangle. So we're going to take our softened butter, just like we did with the first recipe, and we're going to go ahead and spread that over our dough. We just use enough to cover whatever it takes to get our dough covered. About I can't remember what it was, so about 6 tablespoons, but I didn't really measure. I'm just doing whatever it takes to get this covered. Then we're going to sprinkle our cinnamon and sugar mixture over this, trying to spread it as evenly as we can, leaving a little bit of margin on the edges so that we don't push our filling out while we're rolling. And then again, we're going to start rolling from the long side, and we're going to roll this as tight as we can get it. It is kind of difficult, until we get to that edge. We're going to brush this edge with a little bit of water just to kind of help it seal. And then we want to let this sit with the seam side down for just a minute to help it hold that seal. This is going to make 12 rolls, so I'm going to mark it in half and in quarters, and then cut each one into 3s, into 3 pieces, I guess I should say. We're going to spray our pan just like with the others. Again, I'm going to use a piece of thread to cut these. The author says use a non-serrated knife, but I'm going to use the thread instead because it does better for me. An alternative way that you can do this is to cut your dough in strips first using a knife or a pizza cutter, and then roll each of those individual pieces up. We just continue along our roll of dough using our marks from our knife as guides to kind of cut these evenly. This end one's a little bit fatter just because it didn't have as much filling in it. And so I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle that leftover cinnamon over those end pieces. Now we're going to cover these back up, and we're going to let them rise for about an hour, and then they'll be ready to bake. All right, the timer has gone off on our rolls, and let me see. Nope, I don't think they are quite done. So we're going to give them about 2 or 3 more minutes, and we'll come back and check them then. The outside ones look good, but the couple in the middle look like they need just a couple more minutes. Ooh, these look so good. They're not all very round because they got squished in this pan, but that's okay. They smell amazing. So I'm just going to set them on this cooling rack, and we're going to let them cool before we frost them. All right, this is the last stretch and fold for this dough. And then once we complete this, we're just going to let it sit on our counter an hour or so until it starts rising up and getting fluffy. All right, now that we've done our last stretch and fold, we're just going to let this sit on our counter for about an hour to go ahead and develop some of that yeast, and then we are going to move on to the next step. We're going to go ahead and mix up our frosting for our cherry rolls. So we want 1 cup of powdered sugar. We're going to add about a teaspoon of vanilla. And a teaspoon of almond extract. And we're just going to add a little bit of milk, a couple tablespoons. Oops. And we're going to whisk this up, and we want it to be kind of pouring consistency. So you can add more powdered sugar or add more milk depending on, like I think I added too much milk. So we'll add a little more powdered sugar back to this. Alrighty, I think this is good. So all I'm going to do is just pour this over our rolls. They're still warm, but they're not hot. How good do those look? All right, so we'll let those go ahead and finish cooling. I'm going to move this rack so I can use it for another batch here in a little bit. So this is dough 3. This is the one that we did our stretch and folds. And so we're going to dump this out onto our surface now, and we do not want to use flour. We want to use either water or oil. So I sprayed this with my vegetable spray. We're going to do the same thing with our rolling pin, and we want to roll this out to a 12 by 15 rectangle. We want to make sure that we roll all the air bubbles out of our dough. So we're going to mix up our sugar. We want a half a cup of brown sugar. You can actually use brown sugar or just regular white sugar. I didn't get that pressed down very well. And 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. We'll go ahead and mix this together. All right, now we're going to use about 1/3 of a cup of butter. And I did go ahead and melt it. And we're just going to use however much of this that we need. And we're going to use our little pastry brush here and spread the butter over our dough. Oh, I just spilled it. And we only want to use however much we need to cover our dough. Alright, and then just like all the others, we're going to go ahead and sprinkle our cinnamon sugar on our dough. Get it on there as evenly as we can. Again, we're going to just prepare a pan like that. Now, this dough is going to kind of stick because we didn't use flour. So we're going to use, I'm going to spray the edge of my bench scraper, and we're going to use this to kind of roll the dough forward as we roll it. Okay. And again, we're going to go ahead and use thread, to cut our rolls. And I actually think I'm going to cut this into 9. So this dough is definitely harder to work with. Uh-oh, I lost my string. Here it is. Having it oiled like this is making it a little bit difficult to work with versus having it floured. And I don't know if I messed up my lines, but we'll get whatever we'll get out of this. I don't know if we're going to end up with 8 or 9. All right, we ended up with 8 with one little small one. So we are going to let these sit now for about an hour or hour and a half until they are nice and puffy, and then we'll be ready to move to the next step. Our rolls from recipe number 3 are in the refrigerator chilling. They've got a little bit longer. While those finish chilling, we're going to put this baking dish in our oven on the bottom rack, and we're going to preheat it to 400 degrees, and we're going to leave this in for part of our baking. So we're going to put these in our oven now at 400 degrees. We've got a pan of water in there. We're going to let these bake for 10 minutes, and then we're going to turn the temperature down. It's been 10 minutes, so now we're going to reduce our baking temperature down to 350. Whoops. And then we're going to bake this for another 20 minutes. Time is up, so let's see how these look. Oh, they are not done yet. Okay, let's take another look. I think these are done. They just don't have a lot of color to them. Yeah, I'm going to put them back in for just another couple minutes. All right, I'm going to take these out. I think they're done. These are not my favorite looking, and I think it's because of the oil. So this is recipe number 4 going in right now, and we're going to bake those at 350 for 25 to 30 minutes. All right, we're going to let those cool slightly. And while they cool, we're going to go ahead and mix up our frosting. We want 2 cups of powdered sugar, going to add about a teaspoon of vanilla, a third of a cup of melted butter. Go ahead and whisk that together, and then we're just going to add milk until it's a good pourable consistency. So we're going to let these cool down about, they didn't really rise very well. We're going to let those cool down about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and pour our frosting over the top. All right, it's been about 10 minutes. So I am just going to start pouring this frosting over these rolls. And we want to do it while it's warm because we want to make sure that it gets in all the nooks and crannies of our rolls. I want to make sure that we've got all of them covered really well. Okay, now I'm just going to set this back over here with the others to finish cooling. We've got about 8 more minutes on the set of rolls that's in the oven right now. While that batch finishes baking, we're going to go ahead and start mixing up the frosting. This one is a cream cheese frosting. So we've got 4 ounces or a 1/4 stick of softened butter. We want 3 ounces of softened cream cheese. 2 cups of powdered sugar. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. We're going to start with about a tablespoon of milk. And then we want to mix this up till it's nice and smooth. There we go. That's going to be delicious. First 25 minutes is up, so let's see how these look. Give them just a couple more minutes. These look really good. So we're going to put these on our cooling rack and we're going to let them cool about 15 minutes before we put our frosting on. Recipe 1 is just about ready to go in the oven. Recipe 3 is just about ready to roll out. Recipe 1 is about ready to go in the oven. Recipe 2 is about ready to roll out. All right, we're going to go ahead then and mix up our filling for recipe 2. We're going to use 2/3 of a cup of packed brown sugar. Recipe calls for dark, but says you can substitute light if that's what you have, and that's what we have. And we're going to add to this 5 teaspoons of cinnamon. We're going to use our spoon and just stir this all up. And we want to roll this into a 16 by 12 rectangle. I'm going to use my hands to kind of get it started, and then we'll use our rolling pin. And then we're just going to use softened butter, just like the others. We're going to spread it using whatever we need to make sure that the whole thing is covered. All right, just like before, we're going to go ahead and sprinkle our sugar and cinnamon mixture all over our dough. Trying to get it as even as we can. All right, then we're gonna start, just like before, we're gonna roll this as tight as we can get it. Clean up our ends a little bit so that they're not such a mess, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark this into, let's see, I think we'll do 12 rolls with this one. Like before, we'll go ahead and spray our pan, and then we'll use our thread to go ahead and cut our rolls. Maybe should have gone with 9 rolls on this dough. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and cut apart our last 2 rolls. Get those in our pan, and then this one still has to go through its second rise. All right, so there's that pan. We're gonna cover it up and we're gonna let it rise again until these are puffy and touching each other. This is recipe 1. It's ready to go in the oven. It's going to go in at 350 for 25 to 30 minutes. All right, let's check these again and see if they are done. And I believe they are. My goodness. Well, let me check this. Oh yeah, they are. Alrighty. So here's this batch. I'm going to set them on a rack to cool. Okay, so our cherry rolls are done. Recipes 1, 3, and 4 are done. Recipe 1 just needs to cool. We're gonna let that cool about 10 or 15 minutes, then we'll add the frosting. The frosting for both of these last recipes was the cream cheese mixture, so I just made it all up so that I can frost both as they come out of the oven. Recipe 2 was the one that required the longest rise time, so it is still rising. I actually have it on a heat mat so that that will kind of help it rise a little faster. And when that one is fully risen, we'll go ahead and get it in the oven, 350 again for 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll frost it. And then we'll have 4 different sourdough recipes of cinnamon rolls to test, and our cherry rolls, which of course are just because. All right, so I'll be back when this last batch is ready to come out of the oven. All right, everything's done now, so we're gonna do some taste testing. All right, so I'm gonna try this cherry. Okay, that's good. That's really good. All right, so I've got a little piece of each one, so I'm just going to take a bite and compare them. Hopefully I can compare them with all this sugar. That one's good. And I'm not sure how different they're all going to taste. Oh, they do actually taste a little different. So I like number 2. I mean, I like them all, let's be real. I like number 2. Okay. Number 3 has a really good consistency. And that was the one that I thought didn't turn out as well. All right, number 4. Let's see. Okay, so I like the presentation of 1, 2, and 4. I like the consistency, like the softness of number 3. think my overall favorite might be number 4. Finished all of our rolls. We did our taste test last night. And my friend and I both feel like there were things out of each recipe that we liked. His overall favorite, I think, was number 2. Mine, I think, was number 4, but I liked how, I liked the consistency of the rolls in number 3. So I'm thinking what I might do at some point, not today because I already have 5 pans of rolls, but I'm going to pull the things from each recipe and kind of try to put together a recipe on my own that pulls in all the things of each of these recipes that I liked and see how that turns out. So we'll do that at some point, but like I said, not today. My coworkers are already going to be in a sugar coma from all these cinnamon rolls. So that will do it for today's video. I had lots of fun. I love working with sourdough. It's just, I really enjoy it. I also made myself just a loaf of sandwich bread while I was baking yesterday, so I would have that. So like I said, that's going to do it for today. We've got plenty of cinnamon rolls to get us through the next week. And if you guys liked this video, please go down and hit that like button. That helps me out. That lets me know that you guys are enjoying my content. If you have ideas for things you'd like me to make a video on, please put that in the comments. I would enjoy that as well. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.